call this continued meeting of the Anchorage Assembly for the meeting of March 21st, 2023 to order. It is March 22nd. It is 6 p.m., 6:01 p.m. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Solt.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdilla. I understand Mr. Perez-Verdilla asked to be excused. He will be checking in later. Ms. Stern? I understand Ms. Stern is trying to call in.
Yep, we'll try to get her as soon as we can.
I will skip her for now. Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Sweet?
Present.
Ms. LaFrance? I understand Mr. LaFrance will be late. Mr. Constant?
Here.
Ms. Zolotel?
Here.
Mr. Cross?
Here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson? I understand Ms. Quinn Davidson will also be late. Mr. Voland?
Happy to be here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. Stern, are you with us? We're holding for a minute for Ms. Stern. Ms. Stern, are you there?
I'm here, thank you.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, I would ask members to make a motion to change the order of the day. Currently, we have item 14B on the agenda. Ms. LaFrance and a couple of others have asked to make sure they are here for the deliberations to finalize on that item. Yep.
I move to change the order of the day to take up item 14B after Ms. LaFrance arrives to the meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any objection? Hearing no objection, the order of the day has been changed. Next, we'll take up item 14C. Item 14C, AO 2023-28, an ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance of not to exceed $125 million in aggregate principal amount of tax anticipation notes.
Waive reading.
Thank you. The public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone wish to be heard on this item? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What's the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Zolotel, seconded by Mr. Rivera. Anyone wish to speak? So I don't see anyone. I'll just briefly say the tax anticipation notes, for folks who don't know, are it's the funds we take in order to cover the bills as we get through the tax levy at the end of May. This is basically an annual process, and now I see someone in the queue. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm wondering if it's necessary to borrow this much now, since we just got the big check from FEMA, and maybe you possibly only need to borrow 100 million instead of 125. Just a question. It came to mind. Thank you.
It could be Mr. Colis. Mr. Moore, I see, is in the room, the treasurer.
Through the chair to Mr. Peterson, Ross Risvold, I believe, and he'd be best able to speak to that. Mr. Risvold?
Yes, sir. This is Ross Risvold. Can you hear me all right, Mr. Chair?
Yep, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. We do a highly detailed analysis and forecast for our tax anticipation notes and the dollar amount that we issue, and they're for the 100 funds, and the 100 funds are the funds that need to borrow these funds, and we've taken into consideration the receipt of funds that go into the 100 funds, certainly. But the dollar amount that we do need to issue this time is $125 million, and we thought it might be a little lower when we first did the analysis 60 days ago, but now it's really at $125 million. And again, these are short-term notes, very attractive short-term borrowing rate for approximately 9 months. They mature in December, and it's a very good economical short-term financing tool that we use while we wait for the receipt of property taxes, which start to come in end of June or July.
Mr. Peterson?
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing and hearing none, members may proceed to vote on AO 2023-28.
Mr. Solt?
Yes.
Ms. Stern?
Yes.
On a vote of 9-0, AO 2023-28 has passed the body. Next up, we have item 14D, AO 2023-29, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code 6.70.030 to eliminate late payment penalties charged on accounts receivable invoices. The public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone wish to be heard, please come forward. Welcome. Please, for the record, what part of town you're from. You'll have 3 minutes. Could you turn on the green button there? You're good there.
Legal name is Brian Witzke. Preferred name is Brianna or Brianna Lee. Trans, she and her female pronouns. As far as this goes, my belief, as far as any penalties of late payment, as a citizen, we're held accountable for late payments. We get penalized. I hold nothing less to my assembly or my municipality than what is held to me. If they're late on a payment, they have to pay the fine. That's my belief. End of story.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Okay, the public hearing on this item is now closed. What's the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Zalatel, seconded by, who was that? Mr. Rivera? Anyone want to speak to this item? Mr. Salt.
Speak to the item. I just would like someone to explain the rationale behind waiving these late fees.
All right, thank you. Mr. Moore can come on up if that's all right, and he did briefly describe it to us, I think at the Rules Committee or at the Budget and Finance Committee, but you have the floor, Mr. Moore. Oh, you just turned it off. Hit it again. There you go.
Is this good? Thank you. Okay, so I'm Dan Moore, Municipal Treasurer, and through the chair, this particular ordinance, this involves late penalty. It's $25 per month. It's not a lot of money for what we call miscellaneous accounts receivable. And under PeopleSoft, which is prior to SAP, the system was able to handle the processing and penalty in a very automated way. With SAP, they have an accounts receivable module that is built in a certain pretty deep, sophisticated manner that does not make it easy to adapt to this rule within municipal code. So we have tried many, many different ways with IT resources to fully automate the penalty for this accounts receivable, but it just is not happening. So we took a step back. We looked at the cost versus the benefit, and this particular penalty only generates about $8,500 per year of revenue. Very, very small. And the cost of it with our system limitations is $11,000 for the full-time, for the subject matter expert that works on this. So it is not a good use of time. There are plenty of other ways that we can manage our receivable without trying to track or utilize the system for this particular section of code. I will say in response to the prior testimony, even though the penalty would go away, the person or entity would still be subject to referral to a collection agency if they did not pay. So there still is a progressive consequence for non-payment, and that does involve additional costs to the person owing because there's add-on costs from the collection agency.
So there's a follow-up question from Mr. Salt, but before that, I would note that Ms. LaFrance and Ms. Quinn Davidson have joined us on the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Moore, thank you. You actually explained several of my questions. I just wanted to get the public to hear that. So, in your opinion, removing this penalty, you don't anticipate any problems or any increase in delinquent accounts, I should say. Thank you.
Through the chair to Mr. Salt, no, we do not.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Mr. Salt, a quick question for you. Are you on a speakerphone or some form of alternative communication? Because you're breaking up pretty consistently.
Okay, I'll try to put on headphones. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Anyone else questions for Mr. Moore? Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Want to speak to this item? Hearing and seeing none, members may proceed to vote on AO 2023-29.
Mr. Salt?
Hopefully this is a clear yes.
That was much better, thank you. Ms. Jern?
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson? Ms. Quinn Davidson?
On a vote of 10-0, AO 2023-29 has passed the body. Next, we have item 14E, AO 2023-31, an ordinance of the Anchorage Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Section 2.30.020, to provide the chair of the Assembly with the authority to access municipal technology to email all municipal employees. What's the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Oh, excuse me. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone wish to speak to this item? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing none, no. Public hearing is closed. What's the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Rivera, seconded by Member Volland. Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully support this ordinance. We actually had to deal with this situation not that long ago when Ms. Quinn Davidson, Ms. Allerton, and I were working on the holiday change ordinance to add Indigenous Peoples Day and Juneteenth as paid municipal holidays. We wanted to send a bulletin out to all municipal employees to let them know this ordinance was coming up and to encourage them to participate in the public process as this ordinance would have an impact on them. The administration refused to include this ordinance in a bulletin, which to me is ridiculous because the mayor can send all kinds of information out to all municipal employees, some of which has clear political motivations. But if we try to send out information to employees on something that will have a direct impact, the administration can tell us no. So this ordinance to me continues down the path of making us co-equal branches of government as the charter envisions, and I encourage everyone's support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing none, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Salt?
Yes.
Ms. Jern?
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
On a vote of 11-0, AO 2023-31 has passed the body. Next, I'm going to continue going down the road because Ms. LaFrance is on her way in, so we'll take up that item when she gets back. Next up, we have AO 23-32, and Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 28 Election subsection 28.20.010 regarding the time for elections and subsection 28.20.015 regarding the time for passage of ballot propositions. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing on this item is now closed. What's the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Zalatel. Anyone wish to speak to the item? Mr. Cross?
Yeah, I'm looking for clarification why this was brought forward and why this is important. I don't recall us talking about this about Ethics and Elections Committee, but we may have. Could you just refresh my memory why this is coming forward?
Mr. Constant.
Thank you. In our annual Title 28 revisions, which we do after the election process occurs, and we take up improvements based on the last election's experience, we addressed timelines in the previous ordinance, but we were overbroad in addressing the timelines, and we swept into the code the timelines for special elections, which by virtue of being special elections have always had a shorter timeline. And so we created a confusion in the code which made it look like the timelines for special elections needed to be exactly the same as the timelines for regular elections. And so what this does is restores the original timeline for special elections. There's been some conversation among the legal department about do we need to be explicitly clear that we still need 30 days of public notice, but we do still have that in the code. It's required that there is a 30 days public notice that there will be an election coming, which is the standard. And so for all intents and purposes, this is to clarify an overbroad amendment that made in December of last year.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. I appreciate it greatly.
Thank you, Mr. Constant.
Anyone else? Hearing and seeing none, members may now proceed to vote.
Mr. Solt?
Yes.
Ms. Dern?
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
On a vote of 11 to 0, AO 2023-32 has passed the body. Next, we have AO 2023-30, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 21.07, to exempt existing buildings from residential design standards upon change of use to multifamily residential and waive Planning and Zoning Commission review. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing on this item is now closed. What's the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Zalatel, seconded by Mr. Cross. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This ordinance is part of the conversation that came out of our retreat and when we were discussing when buildings change their use technically, but not really practically. Where a hotel is converted into housing, it's still used for habitation. It still has those general safety standards, but in order to do under the current zoning code, as soon as you add a microwave and a refrigerator to that hotel room, you are no longer in a rooming house situation. You are now in a multifamily situation, which would trigger very costly upgrades to these buildings, which would then make them uneconomical in terms of housing conversions. So this continues to be that work to find creative ways to add additional housing stock and to remove regulatory barriers. So I urge your support. Thank you.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for me, this ordinance is fairly simple, and just from a pragmatic standpoint, when we learn from our own experience, from constituents or from community partners, that a regulation or process is cumbersome and it's really increasing the cost unnecessarily of building or creating housing, then we should look into it and make changes. So that's what this ordinance does, and I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Mr. Cross.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody coming together on this one. And my intention and my hope is in the future that we expand this, because this change of use provision that requires a full code compliance study on the property is a reason that a lot of individuals aren't taking a sixplex and maybe turn it into eightplex and adding units or utilizing unutilized space on real estate, because they really just don't want to be dragged through the coals and have to bring an older property up to the current standard, which seems like it should be logical, but sometimes it can be very cost prohibitive. And we're not just talking egress windows or smoke detectors. We're talking, stair rise and run requirements and stuff like that that can be very expensive to develop. So I'm looking forward to this expanding into other change of use situations, and I encourage the support. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing and seeing none, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Salt?
Yes.
Ms. Stern?
Yes.
Ms. LaPrance?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
On a vote of 11-0, AO 2023-30 has passed the body. Next up, we have AR 2023-73, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage approving one or more master lease agreement schedules in the aggregate amount not to exceed $4,500,000 for the purpose of financing the acquisition of school buses for the Anchorage School District. The public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all?
Hello.
Welcome. Please state your name for the record, what part of town you're from. You'll have 3 minutes.
Irene Queetnow, Sand Lake. I have a general question, not just in terms of the school buses, but it seems like we allocate all these extra funds to the school district. Buses, roof repairs, all of that. What's the budget for then? The school budget, that's what, outrageous, more than what the city does. What are they paying for with that if we have all these extra expenses? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing none, public hearing on this item is now closed. What's the will of the body?
Move to approve. Second.
Echoes. Moved by Mr. Rivera, seconded by Ms. Zalatel. Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to point for the purpose of the public testimony, folks to Section 4 of the ordinance, which states that the Anchorage School District shall pay debt service on the schedules and all related financing expenses from its operating budget. So this isn't coming out of our budget, it's coming out of theirs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Anyone else? Nope. Anyone? Hearing, seeing none, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Salt?
Yes.
Ms. Stern?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
On a vote of 11-0, AR 2023-73 has passed the body. Now we will roll back the agenda to item 14B. Item 14B is AO 2023-27. This is an update to provisions for the Office of the Ombudsman to provide authority and protections reasonable and necessary for investigation of complaints qualifying for whistleblower protection. We had a motion to approve on the floor. And I believe at the close of the meeting, I had the floor. But I think at this moment, I will yield the floor if anyone else wishes to speak to this item. Okay, then if not, I will take the floor one more time.
Mr. Constant?
Thank you. I just want to speak to the quality of the service of our ombudsman and say that this municipality is strongly served when it has an independent voice that people can come to from all parts of the municipality to address their concerns in relationship to the operation of the municipality, whether it be employees or members of the public. I have on so many times relied on the wisdom and the experience of the ombudsman to channel the complaints and issues properly to the right entities, and have known him to resolve issues long before they ever become needing to be investigations or rise to the level of complaints that are filed and kept in a process that is confidential and necessary. And so my thanks to the ombudsman for his service, and to the framers of our charter for providing for an ombudsman that the people can rely upon. Thank you. Okay, hearing seen none, members may now proceed to vote on AO 2023-27.
Mr. Salt?
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Salt, could you say that a little louder, please?
Absolutely. No.
Ms. Dern?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
On a vote of 9-2, AO 2023-27 has passed the body. We're going to take a 5 to 10 minute break right now before we proceed on the rest of the agenda. You ready, Mr. Gates? Let's go back on the record. We're back. The clerk's staff will now be passing out a couple of late on the table items. Mr. Gates, there should be 2 documents. I think we've only got 1.
Mr. Chair, point of information.
Yep, go ahead, Ms. Quinn Davidson.
I'm just making sure I'm about 2 minutes away from being out of my car and able to look at my computer, but have those documents been emailed to us as well?
The documents are being emailed right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Ms. LaFrance, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay on the table, incorporate into the agenda, and take up immediately a resolution authorizing action, including an injunction to halt the administration's payment of the contract with Roger Hickle Construction for work on the Tudor-Nelmore Navigation Center.
Second.
Moved by Ms. LaFrance, seconded by Ms. Zalatil. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you. This resolution is urgent to lay on the table because Mayor Bronson has been unclear whether he will follow a code provision to seek assembly approval before making payment to Hickle Construction. In correspondence with assembly leadership, the Bronson administration indicated that it is preparing to make a payment to Roger Hickle Construction without assembly approval this Friday, March 24, and the mayor would not confirm or deny this when asked about it last night. As you will recall, on December 20, 2022, the Assembly passed AO 2022-105, which says that majority approval of the Assembly is required for payment for settlement of claims for a contract or services that were provided without Assembly approval. I welcome Municipal Attorney Helzer's invitation to convene a gathering with Assembly members to work out this issue. However, this is an action of the body and individual members cannot meet and make decisions on behalf of the full Assembly. Therefore, Assembly leadership would like to take up Ms. Helzer's invitation to meet, and we are standing by to schedule a special meeting on this topic. This resolution will give the Assembly and the administration time to come to agreement so that we can resolve this issue as amicably as possible and put all of this behind us. Issuing this Assembly resolution authorizing action, including an injunction, gives us time to work all of this out before a payment is made, and it is in the municipality's best hope at reaching a fair agreement between Roger Hickle Construction and the people of Anchorage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Zalatil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hoping to do this before the item came before the body, but in previous times that the Hickle construction contract came before the body, and it was about whether or not it was going to be specifically a navigation center for people experiencing homelessness. I had been recused from some of those meetings, so on the advice of council, I would like to go through the conflict questions specific to the item before us. I'll use them as a guide to make a disclosure, and then I'm happy to answer questions and have a ruling of the chair. So this is related to whether or not the municipality has the authorization to settle a claim with a contractor. And in my role as the executive director of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, I do not believe that I have a financial or private interest in the matter, and that any potential financial or private interest would vary substantially with the outcome and be conjectural and dependent on actions or factors beyond the official action, that there would be no significant financial or private interest, and it would be the type of interest that perhaps, I don't even know how whether or not it would be generally possessed by the public or a large class of persons, because it's so specific to the municipality. And then the final, any other factors, I would just say that this is really a contractual dispute and the authorization for settlement, and it's really not about the underlying substantive pieces, but whether or not code was violated and whether or not payment should be made.
Thank you. It is the ruling of the chair that you do not have a substantial personal or private interest or financial interest in this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You have the floor.
Thank you. So this is really important. And I want to underscore the importance of this, because this goes to the heart of the separation of powers, the role of oversight of the legislative branch, and the importance of following code. We know we got here because code and procedure was not followed, and if there's an intention to pay a settlement based on the lack of following appropriate process and not seeking the Assembly's approval, then it's frankly the question of why have an Assembly approve appropriations at all? And that is a very dangerous position to put the municipality in. That is a dangerous position to put the municipality in, because it violates the checks and balances that exist in our municipal government, that safeguards the taxpayer and residents' resources. And this isn't any small amount. We are talking millions of dollars. This does not preclude finding a potential resolution that everyone could be happy with, but what it does require is the Assembly to be fully informed, engaged, and not only briefed, but a part of that decision-making process. And so I think that I really want members to consider, it's often scary when we say we're going to pursue litigation, but this is a tool in our toolbox that can be used. It doesn't have to be used. Our attorneys will hopefully continue to consult with the municipal attorney through leadership, and really have all the tools on the table to preserve this balance of power, these checks and balances that are supposed to exist in our municipal government, and ensure that we are doing our jobs to represent our constituents and ensure that money is not being spent improperly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross.
I don't agree with the way the administration went about with this committing Roger Hickle to the $4.9 million and beginning construction without Assembly approval. Okay, I agree with, we know that was a mistake. They've said it's a mistake. I don't know how many times they've said a mistake, 108, maybe more. Now we have a contractor who needs to be paid, and you know, I can't help but look at this and think, if we're not, and it's frustrating, but we're politicizing this homeless problem. Had he come to us with the $4.9 million request and done it appropriately, I believe we would have given the money, and we would have been that much closer to actually having a navigation center. But instead, it's been languishing over there. It's been wasting money. To me, it just seems like, gosh, there was 9 months of studies, over 30 meetings. We have it still on the Anchorage Health Department that it was part of the plan, and now it's as if none of that happened. I feel as if the mistake by the mayor is being exhausted by as much as we can. The navigation center isn't getting any closer to getting done, even though we know that it's a fantastic option to help resolve some of our issues. We're still in the Sullivan Arena. God forgive us. And I look at this stuff and I just look at it, honestly, I mean, it just kind of feels like it's more, how do we stick it to the mayor again? How do we not solve the homeless problem? And how do we score political points out of it? And it's frustrating that it feels that way. I really wish we were focused on a solution. And it feels like this is just a step in the wrong direction. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my concern is if this process, the way I think I understand it, is the mayor would negotiate a settlement, and I would hope with the involvement or the assembly being informed. So once that settlement's in agreement or agreed with the contractor, we can easily approve the settlement, and not where it takes place in a vacuum and then a settlement is put forward before the assembly that we have really no background to, and now we want to negotiate a different settlement. So it's sort of kind of pitting our mom against dad type situation. So I guess what I'd like to hear from the administration. Is there a settlement with Roger Hickle? Is there a plan to bring forward a settlement before the assembly?
Now, could you repeat that question just a little more clearly? I think it was for the administration.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So my question is there a settlement with Roger Hickle, and is there a plan to bring that forward to the assembly for approval prior to settling the claim?
I believe the question was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Salt, is there a plan to bring forward to the assembly a proposed settlement before a settlement is made? Is that a fair assessment of your question?
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could you repeat the question one more time, please? Thank you.
Sure. The question, again, Mr. Salt, correct me if I get it wrong in the nuance, is there an intent by the administration to bring forward to the assembly a proposed settlement before a settlement is made to Roger Hickle Consulting or Contracting?
Just for clarification, the issue here, and I'll have Ms. Elzer speak on this in a moment, but the issue as we see it right now is simply a legal issue. This is a bill that we have to pay. I'm kind of agnostic on the whole thing myself. I worry about the credibility of the city, of the municipality, in the sense that when we are legally obligated to pay something, the message that it sends to especially the contracting public that, oh, there's always the risk when you do business with the municipality, you have to take them to court to get paid. So, but there's the legal issue that's, and I understand your concerns here. Again, I'm kind of agnostic on this. If the lawyers can settle this, I don't think this is a political decision amongst politicians. This is more this end of the table. If it's a bill and we're obligated to pay, we pay. If it's something else and we have latitude where then the lawyers can give us latitude, that's fine. My goal here is to, one, maintain the credibility of the city as far as going forward with future contractors. And but if I'm legally obligated to pay something, then I'm in a position where I have to pay it. If someone can get me to a different answer, I'm happy to do that. But right now, it certainly seems, and we've been dealing with this for more than a month, and the lawyers are quite clear that I'm obligated to pay this. Now, if we can avoid a lawsuit, and we can maybe talk to Hickle and say, can we have some time to figure things out? But I'm under a deadline. It's Friday. Someone get me to the lawyers get me to an answer. I'll do that. But I don't think this is something that's settled between us because it becomes political. this end of the table needs to figure this out, and whatever they figure out, I can run with. I honestly can. So that's why I get, so Ann, if you want to explain a little bit more, that's fine.
Ms. Hauser?
Through the chair, thank you. I have to say it's a bit troubling. I've made good faith efforts to try to discuss this issue with Assembly Council, and they have graciously replied and tried to work on getting some opportunity to speak together as a team, as a city, as a unified group. And I was surprised tonight when I had made difficult efforts to be here. It was a rescheduled meeting, and this laid on the table comes as a surprise. That said, this administration, from all the people and attorneys and management that I've spoke to, feels that it is their obligation to pay the Hickel invoice. From what I understand, there was a contract, but there were task orders and directions that were given to complete portions of that work. And upon an evaluation of that work, it was valid, and there was apparently an audit of the work, and the audit indicated that the amount was just. So the administration would like to pay the bill. I am so brand new to this role, I have not had an adequate opportunity to review the historical side of things, to get to understand what happened in this situation. And I have made good faith gestures to get a meeting together and try to find out if I can help with getting an answer to other people's questions.
All right, thank you. Oh, were you not done?
I'm not.
Okay.
This is an appropriation, from what I understand. I can barely read it in the time that I've received it. And I think you're asking a lot, because I am trying to understand this as best as I can, and I have said that we would get some opportunity to speak. I just have not had an opportunity to get everybody together to do that. And I don't think there's any bad faith here. I think there's just a desire to move forward. And this is an appropriation which can be taken back. And we're here with that money. And we've given notice that we'd like to pay the bill. And we don't want to turn this into a political event, if at all possible. We'd like to get this resolved. If we don't get this resolved, there is a very strong likelihood that the city will be sued. And because our attorneys have indicated that there is a valid bill, that's difficult to battle in court. And I wouldn't want to see the city incur unnecessary legal fees or penalties for that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a bunch of people in the queue. However, the clerk reminds me that we're still on the motion to lay on the table. And so what I believe the best course of action is to do is to hold the queue where it is right now, take the vote and see if there are 8 votes to lay the question on the table. And if there are, then probably take a short break to allow folks to brief themselves on the documents and then come back in short order to finish the debate on this item. Does anyone object to proceeding to the vote to the question to lay it on the table? No, we'll do the motion to approve before, if it gets 8 votes. So is there any objection to just proceeding to that vote? Hearing and seeing none, members may proceed to vote on the question. Shall we lay this on the table?
Mr. Salt, on the motion to lay it on the table.
No.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Yes.
On a vote of 9-2, this item is laid on the table. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Zalatel, seconded by Ms. LaFrance. Let's take 5 to 10 minutes. Somehow the queue disappeared on me. I had Mr. Volland, myself, Ms. Zalatel, and then Ms. Quinn Davidson in the queue, and that's where it will start. Thank you. Now back on the record. Welcome back. In the queue, I have Mr. Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious about, well, I guess I have a question for the acting municipal attorney. If you're able to share why, or maybe a little bit about the rationale of why it's appropriate the settlement would be the full remaining amount, given the historical context, which is detailed in the item. On page 2, the last two whereases, whereas Roger Hickle Contracting Inc. knew or should have known that it was proceeding at risk without the required assembly approval of the General Contractor Services Amendment as proposed in AM 496-2022, particularly given that in 2013 it performed without required assembly approval nearly $5 million of work on Plant 2A for municipal light and power, which led to significant public attention and assembly debate. And whereas the Assembly may authorize the administration to make additional payments to Roger Hickle Contracting Inc., and it invites the administration to convene a work session on the merits of making any such additional payments. So that was done in 2013 when Dan Sullivan was mayor and Amy Domboski and Adam Trombley were on the Assembly. So this just feels like history kind of repeated itself with, even some of the same cast of characters in leadership roles. So I do wonder about the responsibility that the contractor holds for proceeding on work that was not authorized by the Assembly. Why would we say, just kind of throw our hands up in the air and say, we're just going to pay them what we were going to pay them anyway? How is that a fair settlement on behalf of municipal taxpayers?
Point of information before a response, please.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think since both of these items are so interrelated, I think it's fair to quote from either of them, but I think for the purposes of keeping things...
Did I flip them? I might have flipped them.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. We are on the litigation issue.
Got it.
Okay, thanks.
We can also put a pin in that question when we get to the next item, either way.
All right, thank you for your point, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Bond, you're done? All right, so, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. A member suggested that this is politicizing the homeless problem or an effort to, quote, stick it to the mayor. Not what's going on here. An argument was made by the mayor that we have a bill we have to pay and that he worries about the credibility of the municipality when we are obligated to pay. And that this is a simple legal issue and it should be resolved over there. And then he wants to maintain the credibility of the city. So the bottom line of this is that the mayor has already admitted that they did not get assembly approval when they required assembly approval to expand by 10,000% the contract that they awarded without assembly approval. And then they argue that that work that they authorized without approval, they need to pay. And what this effectively does is creates a government in which the executive, it doesn't matter what party they are, can simply authorize work to whomever they want in any amount that they want, and that there's no recourse if in fact the argument of the legal is to be believed. It creates such a loophole that it is dead letter that there is any check or balance in this government. Instead, it is whoever is the mayor gets to write checks to his friends. This is anathema to representative government and the law. It was stated by the previous acting municipal attorney that two wrongs don't make a right. The mayor made a mistake. Oh, and I would put a pin in this. The previous municipal manager told me that she would testify to the fact that The mayor, in concert with Larry Baker, said it was a decision and intent to circumvent the assembly. But maybe we'll come to discovery on those questions. The reality is, two wrongs don't make a right. The mayor violating the code, authorizing work, is the first wrong. And the second wrong would be settling without getting assembly approval in the light of AO 2022-105, which states, where supplies, services, professional services, or construction are provided to or performed for the municipality without an assembly approval required by Section 7.15.040, no payment for the supplies, services, professional services, or construction, including a payment made pursuant to or in connection with a settlement of claims related to a contractor's provision of the supplies or performance of services, professional services, or construction may be made by the municipality unless the payment is approved by majority vote of the assembly. That's AMC 7.15.043. We heard last night from the acting municipal attorney that codes passed by this body are presumed constitutional, that is the law unless challenged. I even argued to the mayor last night that he really has four options. One, let us be sued. That is a legitimate course. Two, present a proposal for settlement to this assembly so that we can provide the check that the code says we were supposed to have but was omitted, either intentionally or not. The facts will come to light. The third option, if he believes that this section of code is unlawful or unconstitutional, he can in fact go to court and ask a judge to decide. And the fourth option, an unlawful option, is to pay a settlement without assembly approval. Now last night we heard from the mayor that squishy response that was, we're going to do what's legal. We've heard from the attorney state that her staff has told her we have to pay these bills, which leads us by preponderance of the evidence that we've seen before us that the intent is on Friday to pay millions of dollars that have never been authorized to be spent on this project in this manner. We are not a land of kings. The mayor cannot simply deem a payment. And we still wait for the opportunity for a presentation of a proposed settlement. I personally, in good faith, met with the municipal attorney, provided many opportunities between 3 days ago and today where we could convene and meet, and we still can. But I believe we have been clearly communicated that there is a demand that they intend to pay by Friday, and we need to slow the roll of this because we cannot allow the code to become dead letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant.
Ms. LaFrance recognized. Oh, I'm sorry. I had Ms. Zalatil, and then Ms. Quinn Davidson, then Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things. I actually have a couple of questions before I want to return to the debate. So I hear the administration driving the timeline toward a Friday deadline. Where does the Friday, March 24th deadline come from? And if it comes from a demand letter from Roger Hickle or from Hickle Contracting, where is the demand letter and why hasn't it been provided to the assembly? So those are my two questions to start.
Through the chair to member Zalatel, the March 24th deadline was established in the letter, and I don't remember the date of the letter, but that's the date we selected when we informed the assembly of the intent to settle. The claim, the invoice from Roger Hickle Contracting, I don't have that with me. We can certainly share that.
So can I do a couple follow-ups? So there's an invoice, not a legal demand letter. I guess I would prefer clarification on that.
Through the chair to member Zalatel, I would have to look at it and to remember what it is. It's been a while since I've looked at it.
May I ask, Ms. Helzer, has the municipal attorney's office or the administration received a legal demand letter from Hickle Contracting for an unpaid invoice?
So I started 4 weeks ago, and I don't recall seeing a demand letter. I do think there was an invoice. There could very well have been one, but I concur with the municipal manager. I don't recall whether there was a demand letter.
Okay. I would hope if there was a demand letter, you would be made aware of it as soon as possible as acting municipal attorney, and that the municipal manager would be aware of it and that the mayor would be aware of it. Because I've been operating under the assumption after getting the memo from the municipal manager that it was literally more than just a bill. To suddenly say we are going to pay just a bill, an invoice, when there is obviously much more behind this than just being presented with an invoice, I'm frankly rather shocked that there's not a demand letter that's driving this deadline of March 24th. So with that said, I have a few comments, if I may. First, I'm really bothered by the use of the term agnostic. Agnostic means to be have a non-committal attitude towards something. It does not sound like the administration is non-committal toward this. It sounds like the administration is committed to paying. And where I really am worried, back to kind of my original point, but it feels so much more clear after hearing the mayor and Ms. Helzer speak about this, is that the entire position of the municipality from the administration side is that it rests on the assumption that they are authorized to pay that bill, or that they were authorized to allow the work to incur the expenses in the first instance. And while I am not practicing law in this instance, I know that there is a lot of factors and discussion that needs to be had about whether or not that reliance on the municipality saying, please go ahead and do this work for us, was justified and reasonable, whether or not any reliance on a notice to proceed or issuing a purchase order or any of that was reasonable under the circumstances. I think as Mr. Volan tried to point out earlier, this isn't the first time Hickel Contracting has done business with the municipality. This is not the first time that Hickel Contracting has agreed to proceed without assembly authorization. And so that reliance on those authorizations seems less and less reasonable to me. They should have known better. And I really hope the administration is evaluating those factors instead of just wanting to cut a check to pay a bill. I expect more analysis and depth of thinking about this issue when we are presented with an invoice. I would want to see a demand letter laying out why they think they should be paid, not simply just an invoice and we're going to stamp it with paid and cut a check. So I really do hope the Assembly will approve this as an option. Again, it just puts the option on the table, and hopefully in the intervening time, there will be the opportunity to find out more. But right now, I'm really troubled that all we have, as the mayor said, is just a bill with a Friday deadline that we don't really know where it came from. So this seems like very little rational basis for purposes of cutting an over $2 million check. Thank you.
Ms. Quinn-Davidson, I know you had to step away. Are you still with us?
I'm here, yeah.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to Ms. Alto for asking those very astute questions. I am honestly shocked that our acting muni attorney does not know if there's a demand letter. I mean, that means she doesn't know the status of what's going on with this project, yet is pressuring us to avoid current municipal law, which requires the Assembly's approval of a settlement, and move forward with some settlement that we don't even understand the basis of. That is really poor legal advice, and I'm really sorry to hear that we don't have more information. It makes me even more certain that the Assembly needs to be engaged on this issue to protect the municipal fiscal situation. Just some background, when Mr. Colhay sent the letter saying that they intend to pay this amount, so the administration has said, for members of the public, that they intended to pay this. They emailed us and told us as much. So I'm a little confused at why, then when we said, okay, great, municipal law requires that you get assembly approval. Let's have a meeting with the assembly and get that approval. And they said, no, we don't want to follow the law. We just want to go ahead and do what we want. And then, both Meg asked last night, Randy asked tonight, are you planning to pay? They've already said yes repeatedly, so I don't understand why, Mr. Bronson's like, honestly, the mumbo-jumbo stuff, I can't even track what he's saying half the time, but he's obviously avoiding answering the question. But I agree with other members who have said clearly they're planning to pay because they've told us that via email. So what they're saying is they're trying to pressure us into going around municipal law to settle something that they don't even understand. That is really dangerous legally. It's shocking even for this administration, to be honest. And I'm just really glad that Ms. Zalatel or whoever it is brought this forward. I didn't realize what a bad situation we were in. Obviously, we need to follow municipal law, which requires that the assembly approve any settlement. So I hope we don't have to initiate litigation. That's just not a great use of the municipality's time and money. But with this administration breaking the law repeatedly, sometimes it's the only choice we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Ms. LaFrance, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first off, I want to do what's right and fair by the contractor and the public, and I believe that is what all of us want to do, is to find a fair and reasonable path forward in all this. The municipality has been presented with an invoice, but I don't have enough information to know if it's valid. I don't know if there was a valid contract. I know that the amendment for the work wasn't approved as the law required it to be approved. I have been told by the mayor's team that a notice to proceed was not issued, and this is very standard for contracts, to have the go-ahead given officially in writing. So I don't know if the municipality is obligated to pay this bill or not. We have not been briefed as an assembly, and I appreciate Ms. Helzer's intent to meet, I do, and I hope that we still can. We had a Teams meeting scheduled on Monday, just so the other members know. It did get bumped for a pre-agenda meeting. Mondays before assembly meetings are busy, I understand. We weren't able to reschedule. It's, as I said, very busy before meetings, and we get that. But again, it's not clear to me that this is a valid bill. And equally so, if it is, isn't there an obligation to follow the law? I don't understand why, if there is a legitimate claim for this invoice, isn't there an equally legitimate obligation to follow the law? The law which states that the assembly must approve a settlement when the contract has not been approved. So I just don't understand why we are just buzzing right by that. That's a pretty big deal. So I hope that we move forward with this. I do have a question for Assembly Council, because I think what this can do is ensure that we meet, ensure that the Assembly is briefed on the settlement, but my understanding is we don't necessarily need to follow through with an injunction. I know the timeline is tight, but would Assembly Council or Legislative Council please comment on that if this resolution is approved? Is my understanding correct that we would not necessarily need to follow through with an injunction should it not be necessary?
Madam Chair, Matthew Hurt, Legislative Council. No, we don't have to follow through if it's approved. The wording of the resolution authorizes the Assembly Council to initiate litigation, but it's done in consultation with Assembly leadership. So if the direction I receive following, or Mr. Gates receives following this memorandum.
Point of information, a point of order. I can't hear.
Yep,
Could you
Mr.
please
Hurt,
speak up, Matthew?
can you bring the microphone closer and make sure it's...
Yes, and I would like the record to reflect this is the first time somebody has told me I'm not talking loud enough. So, all right, sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn-Davidson.
To clarify, yes, Madam Chair, it is not a fire and forget resolution. Once, if the Assembly were to approve the resolution, the language of it requires the Office of the Assembly Counsel to coordinate with Assembly leadership and to consult with leadership's office, basically to engage with the court to achieve a result most desirable. But if the direction we receive, or if it looks like we can handle things without going to a courtroom, obviously I think that's probably every attorney's preferred resolution. So yeah, it's not just starting the engine and walking away, I guess, to use more metaphors than necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Hurt. And just a final comment, I would just ask my fellow Assembly members to please support this. Again, it doesn't, it's not assured that we would need to go to court, but I think that this creates space to ensure that conversation will happen with the Assembly and that information will be shared and that we can review some of the facts that have not been made available to us. And I just would say that, you know, the mayor raised the point of the credibility of the municipality. And I would say, you know, Mr. Mayor, this is about the credibility of the mayor and following the law. And frankly, I think the credibility of the municipality is at stake if the law is not followed. And we need to follow the law, and the law says, according to AMC 7.15.043, that the Assembly must approve the settlement before any payment is made. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, you know, if you read this resolution, which I appreciate all of the historical facts which the sponsors have included in this resolution, Section 1 really talks about the unlawful disbursement of funds and preventing unlawful disbursement of funds. And it's unlawful because the contract was never approved by this body. So what do we do when someone is being unlawful with public money? Do we just let it go and write a big check to the contractor? I don't think that's an appropriate action to take, not without going through the appropriate process, which I think would be to bring a settlement before the body for approval. And I said that months ago when we had the Hickle contract before us in October. So the item we have before us has nothing to do with politics, which I guess is like the word of the day to keep talking about. It is about the law and figuring out what we do when something unlawful has happened. And if I'm reading these documents correct, 2.025 million of the 4.9 million has already been unlawfully dispersed, and we're trying to stop another 2.455 million from being unlawfully dispersed. If I'm wrong on that, I would invite the sponsors to correct me. Further, as I'm understanding this discussion, this litigation and possible injunction would put a pause to an unlawful disbursement of funds until we can come to some type of agreement and the administration chooses one of the lawful ways to deal with this issue. So understanding what this resolution is trying to do, I will be supportive of it, and I'm thankful the sponsors have brought this forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cross.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've heard us say, listen, that whether or not this is an accurate invoice or what's going on, you know, maybe I was the only one who got it, but Kent Colhase on February 28th of 2023 sent both the invoice and the detailed review of the invoice. We've had quite a bit of time, and I mean, I went through it. It's 23 pages. It includes invoices with itemized expenses from Roger Hill Contracting, Alcan, Alaska Mechanical, GMW Fire Protection, and preformed engineered structures, then with a review from a third party to make sure they're accurate. So, I mean, I think to say, is this an actual invoice or is what it is, I think it is. It is an invoice, and it's been verified the work has been done, and we've taken possession of many of the materials that are on this invoice. It's not just labor that we're talking about actual materials that we've taken possession of. And I guess my other thing is when you're looking at this, as we analyze this, I'm curious about, the time for those disputes. I think is it 90 days to file a mechanics lien? And if they sent the invoice on December 17th or somewhere, maybe part of that date is being driven when they need to file a mechanics lien or take legal action. Maybe, I would like to see the demand letter. That would be appreciative. But the invoices and stuff we have exhausted information on. So I don't necessarily agree that we haven't been informed. We've seen this. We've had time to chew on it. I mean, I guess where does it end is what I'm looking at. I mean, if he comes back and asks for us to settle, we're going to look at these documents, right? If the mayor comes to us and says, hey, listen, I want assembly approval, are you going to look at these? Or since December 22nd, has anybody reviewed this and said none of this is accurate? Because I haven't. That's not the question? So you're just wanting permission, you're just looking for approval to pay any kind of settlement. And it's not about disputing the invoice or its legitimacy. So I guess that's just my thought. I mean, I guess when I hear people say, is this a legitimate invoice? Is this real? What's going on? Is this a reasonable settlement? I mean, I guess we have the documents. I would encourage everybody to go through them if perhaps it's been a while and you forgot about them. But ultimately, I see I see it all ending the same way. I don't think that I kind of see that we're eventually going to have to pay this. I don't necessarily agree with the way it's gone down. I just wonder at what point it ends. We're eventually going to have to pay this invoice, and I want this. I mean, I wish we could find a reasonable way to get through this. Thank you.
Mr. Bronson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll have Ann speak to this.
Just a couple of points of clarity. I had some people in my office look to see if there was a demand letter at some point. I mean, I've been here for 4 weeks, so it's not really reasonable that I would know what might have come a year ago or 6 months ago. I understand that there were claims, and that is how we stated it in the letter, that the claims were owed. I would concur with Assemblyman Cross. I personally have made multiple overtures to try to get this resolved too. We couldn't meet the day of the assembly, and we couldn't meet the Monday before the assembly. But I was available and willing to meet any time before that. When we sent the letter out, I think the date was now February 23rd. So I look forward to a resolution to this. I have assured Assemblyman Constant in emails today through his attorney and through their attorneys that there are no malintentions here. We have a bill. The bill was verified. We feel it's important to talk about paying it. We could extend the deadline if we needed to do that. We don't have to, what we need to do is come to a resolution, and hopefully it can be outside of a political debate. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Volland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That sort of prompts more questions for me. First, I just want to say that the majority of people sitting up here, including the mayor, we are politicians and we are policymakers, and the nature of what we do is political, and what we do with taxpayers' money is political. And so I don't know. That's just a weird talking point, I think. But okay, so you said we could extend the deadline, and I think we were trying to get to this a little bit earlier. What is the deadline based on? Yeah, for you, Ms. Helzer, if that's okay.
Well, through the chair, this letter was sent out, I believe, the first week I started here, but the entire legal department came together and said, this is a valid bill. If we are sued, we will lose. And so because of that information, we had to get a letter out. I'm sorry, I might need to be reminded of your question.
What is the deadline in that letter based on? Who I guess, what is the pressing timeline?
I think there was an appropriation, and there might have been a requirement under the appropriation that the money be used for the purpose it was appropriated for. We knew that the Assembly could pull back that appropriation, and we needed to let you know that we had this bill out there. We had done everything that, I say we, the administration had done everything they could to verify that the bill was valid. They produced an audit report.
And I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me right now. So is the timeline, or is the deadline derived from the bill? Does it say on the bill that's like the pay by?
So I can try to get a hold of that right now.
Okay, I'll move on.
But I don't know quite how that deadline was coming about, but
okay, that's fine. So you said you concur with Member Cross, and earlier I think you intimated that we should pay the full amount as a settlement, and I think again you just reiterated that you feel that's appropriate to pay just exactly what the bill asked for. And I guess, so is that part of your legal analysis? That's, why should we pay the full amount, I guess is my question. Why is that the position of either the acting municipal attorney or the administration?
So these are not my personal positions. When I came on board, there was a bill. Our legal department looked at it. They said it was valid. Roger Hickle Construction had put forth a claim. We understood that that claim had to be paid, and there was an appropriation designated for that claim. So we notified the Assembly of it. If there is a possibility, in my now research, when I've told Assemblyman Constant and his attorneys that I'm going through this, I've pulled the contracts, I'm trying to get a hold of task orders, trying to understand what happened, and that I would communicate with Assemblyman Constant my personal investigation of this situation. But you have to understand, I'm coming into this brand new, so I'm late in that process. I have encouraged the administration that we should have a meeting with the Assembly to figure out how to make you guys comfortable with whatever happened in that situation, and to understand that that's the extent of my involvement in this particular case. We have other attorneys from our office who are not here because we didn't get any notice of this situation coming tonight. I would have brought them. They're not here and they're not available. They would know more than I.
Okay, so would you say then, is it more accurate to say, it's not your personal position, but it is the position of the municipal attorney's office that we should pay the full amount requested in the bill?
It's the position of the Department of Law
Department of Law.
that the bill has been reviewed and that it should be paid. Now,
even in light of the historical context in 2013, you're not familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with
Okay.
the historical context.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you. The more we talk about this, the more frustrated I become. So we are hearing now we could extend the deadline, but we've been driving toward a deadline that was set by someone, and we don't know where that deadline comes from. If that deadline comes from a potential legal claim that could be filed, that would be good to know. If it comes from a date on an invoice, or as Mr. Cross suggested, a mechanics lien could be filed, all of those things would be good to know. That would allow us to evaluate the urgency placed on this matter. Additionally, we're hearing that the legal department has conducted an analysis. I guess I'm hearing there's been an analysis of the bill, and I've looked at the Boutte Company's verification of the costs, but what I haven't seen is a legal analysis of the potential exposure and under what theories legal claims could be brought if the bill is not paid. And that is a minimum in this instance, a minimum, I believe. And then finally, how to make us comfortable? Bring us the options and the information and the legal analysis, not just the verification of the expenses, so that we can evaluate those, bring them to us, please, so that we can make this decision. That said, again, unless this date of the 24th is absolutely taken off the table and set out weeks from now, not mere days, not just to next week, weeks from now, I think we need to act on this resolution because we don't know what's driving the deadline other than their own whim. Thank you.
So next, we have Mr. Cross. I would note, Mr. Cross, this will be your third and final time in the queue for this because we're allowed two, but you get an extra just,
I appreciate that.
Ms. Zalato
I was just going to point, and I appreciate that, Mr. Constance. You know, so when it comes to contractors who do work for you, it's very important, you know, what drives these deadlines. One, mechanics liens. I'd be interested to know what's in the contract, and if the contract had a pay-by date, that may be what's driving it. It may have provisions that if you don't pay by date, that's all really helpful information. But as far as as far as our responsibility, you know, I understand that on our side, we got to do, you know, we have, whether we dispute whether or not assembly approval or not on if we pay invoices. But if it wasn't Roger Hickle, if this was a pizza that had been delivered and we took possession of it, we'd be paying this invoice. Guys, we have a tendency to complicate it because it's millions of dollars. But it is well known that if you come home one day and somebody's putting a roof on your house and you don't say anything and they continue to do work, you're liable and you will have to pay that invoice because you didn't. There's some responsibility you have when you either order something and say, well, yeah, I ordered it, but I didn't sign the credit card receipt, so you don't have to pay. Ha ha ha, I got you. There's gotcha, like invoices, and then there's actually, you ordered the work, I began it, you took possession of it, here's my invoice. Your invoice has been approved and been acknowledged by a third party to say, yes, this is an actual, the appending conclusion by the Boutte Company is this is an actual submittal. The total is $2,455,351. And whether we do assembly approval or not, I think we're going to have to pay it. I mean, and you're trying to settle for less, but you've taken possession of it, you've benefited from it to some extent, and then you want to renegotiate what are legitimate expenses. I don't think we're going to be able, my experience in dealing with contractors, all those maybe millions of dollars, even if it was a roofing contractor and you took possession of wood he delivered to the wrong job site, but you kept the wood, you're paying him. And he's not going to pay you a discount. You're going to lose that in court. Now this is going to be millions of dollars, and all you're going to have is you're still going to pay it plus more attorney's fees. So it's just, you know, that's just my experience with these things. So thank you very much.
Mr. Salt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate this debate, and I think I'm leaning towards what Mr. Cross is at, that this is an invoice. It's not a settlement. We can disagree to the validity of the invoice, but again, I'm just playing the top of my head. If the mayor were to bring this forward as a settlement, show us the documentation, request that we pay that amount, we would pay that amount. I think if we did something less, it would harm the credibility of the municipality and whether or not contractors work with us, knowing that if they do work that's agreed to by the administration, they may have a hurdle of also having now to convince the assembly after the fact. I think that's a dangerous place to be. I do certainly understand what we're trying to do. Yeah, should it be a settlement? I wholeheartedly believe that it should be brought before the assembly, and we should be brought along the journey of making that settlement so we're all nodding and smiling in the right direction as fiduciaries of the taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I looked at the invoice that was sent, and the Bow Lake Company has verified the charges as legitimate. But the situation, the way I'm seeing it, is since Roger Hickle Construction Contracting in the past has done a similar thing, if we pay a $2.4 million check this Friday, I believe that we're rewarding bad behavior. And we might be encouraging future contractors to do something similar. And so this could be precedent setting, and that's the reason that we're having this long discussion about it, because we want this to be done right so that we don't have problems in the future because we let this slide this time. Thank you.
Mr. Constant?
Thank you. I am somewhat sympathetic to the concern of the contractor being made whole insofar as what whole means. And I think that's a topic of conversation about a settlement that should happen. I'm more so concerned about the subcontractors who did work for this contractor, believing in good faith that that contractor had done everything that they needed to do and that the assembly had appropriated the funds. So to me, it's the subs that I'm more concerned about, the ones who were actually doing the work, not just the general contractor. But that said, we did not order the work. The work was ordered outside of the law. It's like the person who ordered the pizza Mr. Cross was talking about is now demanding that the taxpayers pay for their pizza. And it just doesn't add up. I do believe if this is affirmed, even if we do file an injunction, because I believe the administration has communicated as clearly as they're willing that they're going to settle this if they can, that we will come up with a reasonable settlement that addresses the concerns that makes whole the subs, makes whole the contractor insofar as the facts demonstrate that they should be made whole. But that entire Boutte report that suggests that those contracts are, or those invoices are payable because they were based on work that was authorized, in my opinion, and this is where differences of opinion exist and courts are the place to settle them, there was no legitimate legal right to authorize the work. And so how can the work from there proceed to be argued to be legitimate? And that's where the assembly is the body that has provided the flexibility and the authority to go back and fix it. We're not going to be browbeaten to continue violating the law. We're not going to do it. There is no power that the mayor legally has to spend money from the Treasury without authorization of this body. And I would say the appropriation, as is the subject of the other document, was gone in October of last year when the Assembly rejected the proposal. It didn't sit in the capital budget waiting for the Assembly to resurrect the project. It died, it ended then. So, to the members, now the moment of consequence. As the last person in the queue, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Solt?
No. No.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
On a vote of 9-2, unnumbered AM has passed the body. On a vote of 9-2, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly authorizing the Assembly Council's office to pursue litigation related to the payment of claims regarding the Navigation Center construction costs has passed the body. Ms. France.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay on the table, incorporate into the agenda, and take up immediately a companion resolution.
Second.
Moved by Ms. LaFrance, seconded by Ms. Zalatel. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This resolution does three things. It reappropriates the $4.9 million that was previously appropriated. It clarifies that no funds are available to make payments in excess of $50,000, which was the amount of the authorized contract. And it clarifies that the Assembly has not approved by majority vote the authorization of any such payments beyond that amount. And I know some members have already referenced this resolution. It has three other sections, right? That in Section 1, any unlapsed appropriations are hereby reappropriated. The mayor and administration may not use any funds previously appropriated to make such payments. And then Section 2, the Assembly finds and declares it has not approved any payment to Roger Hickle Contracting. And then it invites the mayor and administration to convene a work session, in my view, or a special meeting as needed to discuss the merits of making any additional payments so that the items that we have just discussed, the legal analysis, the settlement letter, and information about the claim can be discussed. And I think that, okay, sorry, that's why, okay, thanks. But anyway, that the urgency of that is because it goes with the resolution we just passed, and it is the part, that addresses the funds.
Mr. Rivera, is it on the motion to lay on the table? Thank you. So if there's no one else, let's please proceed through the threshold question. Members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Salt, on the motion to lay on the table.
No.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
He's excused. On a vote of 8-2, the unnumbered AR.
Yeah, you can read it now.
Unnumbered AR, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly reappropriating not to exceed $4,900,000 previously appropriated by AR 2022-111S as amended for construction of an adult shelter and/or navigation center to the extent any such amount remains available, and the appropriation has not lapsed, to clarify that no funds are available to make payments in excess of $50,000 that arise out of or in connection with RFP 2022 P077, Contract C-2022-001049, AM 496-2022, and/or that relate to the provision of construction manager general contractor services for navigation center to be located at 4501 Elmore Road, and to clarify that the Assembly has not approved by majority vote pursuant to AMC Section 7.15.043 to authorize any such payments. What's the will of the body?
Actually, Mr. Chair, before we, I just want to again state and have you rule with the disclosure, because we have a disclosure requirement for every item that comes before the body. I didn't previously participate in some of the navigation center items as they related to specifically homelessness. I believe this again is like the last item, involves a monetary settlement and the availability of those funds. And so I don't believe I have a conflict of interest, but I will leave that to the ruling of the chair.
I would rule that you do not, in this case, have a substantial personal or financial interest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Ms. LaFrance, seconded by Ms. Zalatil. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This resolution makes clear that funds are not approved for any settlement payment, and it as previously referenced, includes a lot of historical information as well. But again, it just makes that very clear that funds are not approved, funds are not available for payment of any settlement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will support this resolution, but I do have a question. Where are the funds being reappropriated to? Section 1 says, they are hereby reappropriated, but I don't get a sense of where the money is going, reading the document, and I don't see any funding strings.
Yep.
Is the theory that that the money will just go back to the fund it was in before we approved the 4.9 million?
There is no money there. This is just clarifying clearly that the money that they claim exists is reappropriated. Go ahead, Ms. Alto.
Thank you. To Mr. Rivera, and it's really clear in the title, to the extent any such amounts remain available. So we don't have any reason to believe any such amounts remain available, but we want to be very careful should any such amounts remain available. So we had considerable help and research on trying to figure out if any amounts are there, and it's a little unclear. And so we want to be really crystal clear that they're not available.
I guess just a quick follow-up. So, sure, that's confusing to me, but I can deal. So since there is a lack of clarity on whether there are funds available or not, this language says, just in case, we reappropriate them, but then where do they go?
They're swept.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? Ms. Alto.
Thank you. I appreciate that we have this before us. Again, I'm troubled that we have to go to these lengths to make it very clear that one, we haven't authorized any payment, and two, that there's no funds available for the payment. Just for a little context, when we received the memorandum or the letter from the municipal manager, it was based on an assumption that there was funding available, although no funding was ever approved, and that reliance on an item that ultimately wasn't approved is what's troubling. And so this is a really lengthy document just to ensure, and this is actually the protection, I believe, for the taxpayer. This says there's no money. Please don't spend any money again and again and again. And I think that these two things are really important to go together, these two items. We can't be more clear than this, I think. While we've just authorized our attorneys to be able to enforce the ability to say no to making the payment, this is I think the meat of it. This is what says there's no money for payment, and we have said multiple times, and we're saying one more time, there is no money for payment. So I really do urge your support. I think this puts that giant exclamation point on the statement we've been saying all along. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. I would just say to the public that's listening really clearly, again, read the section. As the France read, Section 3, that the mayor administration are invited to convene a work session to discuss the merits of making any additional payments to Hickle Contracting. The second thing I will say is, it may not feel like it, but this is a lifeline to the administration. With that, I urge your support.
Thank you, Mr. Constant.
Members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Solt.
No.
On a vote of 8-2, unnumbered AR resolution, the Anchorage Assembly reappropriating not to exceed $4,900,000 previously appropriated by AR 2022-111 has passed the body. Having no further business, we will move to audience participation. Welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name and what part of town you're from.
Hello, this is Irene Queednow. We have heard a lot again about that the law needs to be followed and we can't do unlawful things. We cannot allow the code to become dead letter and that the code is law. I want to remind you and the public, you were spending CARES Act money in ways you were not allowed to spend, and the Inspector General talked to you and told you you cannot do that. I would call that unlawful. You did not follow the Open Meetings Act in 2020. You were taken to court, you shut out the public and held meetings. You were taken to court over it, and you settled out of court. That usually happens when you don't think you can win. I would call that unlawful because you did not follow the Open Meetings Act. You did not give us a special election. When the mayor's chair was vacated, the code very specifically asks for one. I would call that unlawful. So these are just some examples. So your history of not following the law disqualifies you, in my opinion, from now sitting there and saying, we have to follow the law and we have to make the code so that it does not become dead letter. Your example is a very bad example. And you have several lawyers on the dais, which I would think would know the law better than the normal people. And yet you were not concerned about any of the things. You also violated the separation of power by passing an AO that allows you to remove a duly elected mayor. Do not talk to me about not doing unlawful things, because in my opinion, you have done many of those. Then I want to talk to you about, we have spoken many times about that we need to attract people to the city and to work at the Muni. I want to tell you that I have several friends who moved out of the city. Some out of the city, some actually out of state. You know what the two reasons were why they moved? Because of you and your policies and because of the school board and the policies they are driving. Those were the reasons they left. And if you talk about not attracting people to work at the Muni, maybe you need to look in the mirror. I have watched you treat the mayor very disrespectfully. I have watched you treat the public very disrespectfully. Why would anybody want to work at the Muni when there is a potential to have to work with you? Thank you.
Welcome. Please state your name, what part of town you're from. You have 3 minutes. Up. Hold on, yeah, hit the button and the red light will turn on. There you go.
Hi, I'm Janelle Walton. I live in Fairview District. So we have expanded the capacity and times to the Sullivan Arena again. You know, for a group of people who claim to be worried about the public process and informing the community, that seems to have been forgotten to be discussed about with the Fairview community. We didn't hear a single thing about that despite having a 3-hour meeting on Saturday. And there are 2 new late on the table items, which were huge with no public comment. And Mr. Rivera, if you were serious about the clean slate start over, then why wasn't Sullivan Arena on the list of shelters to be taken off the table? And Mayor, you seem to be purporting to be worried about involving the public in the process and listening to those who live here, but neither of these 2 men who were also at this 3-hour meeting mentioned involving the Fairview community in this clean slate decision. Yet there is now worry about the Arctic Rec Center being used and the Tudor and Elmore Navigation Center being built. But Mr. Rivera's resolution achieved what he wanted, which was to get less talking about the Arctic Rec Center specifically. Listen, it was really nice to see Mayor Bronson, Mr. Rivera, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Fields in the room with the members of the Fairview community engaging in a really meaningful combination of ideas to help Fairview and shoulder the burden of homelessness being constantly defaulted to Fairview. And we came up with some really great ideas that I want to just throw out at you real quickly. For instance, we really liked the idea of moving the substation back to the Cars on Gamble, and even stationing that mobile crisis team there, since the area seemed to have a lot of traffic with those experiencing homelessness, mental health, and alcohol and drug addiction. There's really been a beeline directly from Sullivan Arena to Black Angus to the Cars, and that would be really great to put that back there. And the manager of CARS is very much on board with that. We also learned that at the meeting that when it comes down to it, everyone is a NIMBY. Everyone. All right? And the reason is because the city continues to not have a plan to mitigate these soft off-site impacts. They watch what's happening to Fairview and they don't want it to happen to them. So we discussed, that this is a serious Anchorage-wide problem. It's an Alaska-wide problem. Everyone who hears that they're going to have a homeless shelter in their neighborhood can name all of the churches and dozens of businesses and schools near their shelter. Trust me, there are plenty within close proximity of Sullivan Arena. But we learned in that Saturday meeting that one possible solution is creating many smaller shelters on the bus system scattered all over the city, south, east, north, west. And this may be the best way to combat the NIMBYism since we all equally share in this common city issue. Also, the idea of getting smaller shelters means that the number of off-site impacts is less in general. This means that your idea of using the Golden Lion, the Arctic Rec Center, and despite how the construction process at Tudor and Elmore went down, this is a viable idea. Create many different housing options in areas around town. We have seen that when you keep it small and spaced out, it can be successful. I know it's tempting to play a political game at a time when people are about to be reelected. But try to remember that there's a huge vulnerable population of humans in our city that need help, and don't forget to balance that with the needs of the constituents, not just the ones that get loud and angry when it's about to happen in their backyard.
Thank you, Ms. Walton.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Just a couple things. We didn't come to you on the 360 increase, the Fairview Community Council. We're kind of in desperate straits, and so that something has to be done. And so I just wanted you to know that. And the other thing, I knew all three working groups on Saturday came up with the notion of the substation. So I went back to the chief of police on Monday and asked him to do a quick study on that with his senior staff. We've gone from 7 to 3 substations, and there's a reason for that. They're not used anymore because there's so little downtime, because we're at 91% roughly manning at the police department. He says it wouldn't get used anyways. So we're exploring options. He's going to create a report on that for me, but we did go back and try to do that, and we'll talk to Denise, the manager, and kind of explain that to her, because she was really motivated, and she has the footprint for us to use. So I just wanted you to know that it didn't fall on deaf ears Saturday. It was a good 3 hours spent, but there's just limitations. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
That wasn't
Mr.
a
Mayor.
question, right?
No, but thank you for your comments and your persistence. Thank you.
Don't have a choice.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome. Nope, turn it back on for her. Thank you. Welcome. Please state your name for the record, what part of town you're from. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Brian Witzke. Legally, I do prefer to go by Bree or Brianna. I'm here tonight to say you guys thank you at the same time that we can do better. I'm not here at anyone's fault to say anybody is doing anything wrong or that everybody is doing everything right. I'm just a simple civil servant of my own group, and then I face adversity every day of my life. In my current situation, I no longer have a home, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here since I no longer have a home, and I have the PTSD I do from the situation. Anchorage and the streets of my home again. I'm proud of that. In '95, I came up here away from my family as I was outcasted because I could not put up with the abuse. And I will not put up with the abuse that we have in our streets, in our city, and together we can do better. I encourage this. Much of what I've heard in the last 2 days, much of what I've seen in the last 30 years living in this town, we have all missed multiple steps that we could do better. With that, I'm not saying I have all the answers. Lord knows there's just no way. And I do believe God is on my side, and it's maybe time that we look at bringing some of our faith, not mine, not yours, but all of them back into our lives for the morals that we need. That being said, moving forward on many things with the hot topics of our homeless, I've been working with them hand in hand. I've been putting lotion on their hands. I've taken them to gyms to give them showers out of the Sullivan because it's unacceptable of what I am seeing. It hardens my heart, and I don't want that. I already have enough issues, and we all do. That being said, I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed this up. My name is Brianna. I created this paper right here, January 21st, out of my own pocket. Over $5,000 to put communication between you guys and the people with you guys. I welcome it to you guys. I will make sure there's copies available if need be. It is last month's, it's out of date because I am homeless and do not have the electricity nor the funds to continue. But I am fighting that fight as my full-time job, as my van is out there that says I am powered by donation. And I expect that we work all together to find the solutions. I have a commercial that has a few seconds that left I'd like to share. As I did take on the corner of Benson and Northern Lights when I was working as pizza. It was something I seen every day. And every day, I almost got killed when I was doing my job. That's unacceptable. Hi, my name is Bree. My legal name is Brian Witzke. I use she and her pronouns. As for 13 years, I've been the trans woman I am. Today, I'm currently doing a little commercial, if you want to call it to say. This is the corner of Bering and Benson. 2 weeks ago, I informed on the helpline, 611, or is it 211, or whatever it is, to the street department, that this intersection was unsafe. Me and my crew are making it safe today. Courtesy brought to you by a shovel and a pick. As they say, the highway department has better tools. I know my time is up, and I leave it with you guys. I will not bill you for that work, as I will not bill you for any unapproved work. Because again, communication is the answer. I expect nothing less, and I give you the grounds to start it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bree. Anyone else? Anyone at all? Okay, next on the agenda we have, actually we have two people to call. I'm sorry, Travis, can we call first Mr. Gordon?
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Gordon. This is Christopher Constant, Anchorage Assembly. We are a continued meeting from last night. You signed up for audience participation. You'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name and what part of town you're from.
Okay, my name is Bruce Gordon. I live in Chitina, Alaska. My wife and I have oncology appointments in Anchorage. We do shopping there. Multiple Anchorage appointments, engineering and automobile. I would like to request that the Assembly consider a law to make it a felony for Anchorage Police Department to turn off either the audio or the photographic function of their cameras that they're getting. Alaska is ranked number 3 in the nation in people killed by police. We have lots of minorities, and we apparently have a problem if we're ranked number 3. And that is that, and the fact that if Anchorage police or any police investigate themselves, you're always going to come up with a prejudiced answer. And those are my 2 points, and I appreciate you for listening. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you for your call. Can we please now call Mr. Gephardt?
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Gephardt. This is Christopher Constant with the Anchorage Assembly. Our meeting from last night was continued to today, and you'd signed up for audience participation. If you'd like, please state your name for the record, what part of town you're from. You'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I had signed up for a different one that I think was finished last night.
Oh, so you wanted to provide testimony on a specific item?
Yeah, it was online I had signed up for. Chris, this is Scott Gephardt. I had signed up for the it was 10D26.
Okay, well, that item has been disposed. You could speak if you'd like on any topic, or we can move on.
I'll let you guys try to get out of there.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gephardt. Have a good day.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Bye-bye.
Now, on to member comments. We'll start with Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Member Volland.
No comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cross.
Thank you. Just real quick, I really hope that we can get past this to get working on the Tutor Nav Center, because I do think it's a good idea. Listen, the navigation system, the navigation model, I think is it's a model that works. I do not believe that low barrier shelters should be in the middle and the hearts of our neighborhoods. I think that they should be in areas where there's adequate law enforcement and things like that, because we've seen what they do every time we place them in people's neighborhoods. We cannot deny that. And then I believe that the best place for places that have a higher barrier of entry, that's where you put them closer to homes. I think it's a proven model, and I believe in the Tutor Nav Center. I know it's not the cheapest way to go, but I think the location and the model is one that works. And I hope that we can get past this to doing what is in the best Anchorage for just all of Anchorage, for the people who desperately need these services that just continue to languish for us to provide. Thank you, my Assembly team.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Ms. Alatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think tonight, again, demonstrates why we need experienced, consistent leadership within the executive team of the administration. It's really concerning to me, yet again, to have an acting position, one like the municipal attorney's office, where we've had enough turnover and churn to then kind of be hampered in our conversation, and similarly knowing that there are so many acting positions. So I do hope that if confirmations are planned for any positions, that they be brought forward soon, so that we can try to find some stability, particularly as we take on big issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to everyone for the hard work last night and tonight. And Kevin, I appreciate that you said assembly team. I really like that. I wanted to note again, too, that I want to do what's fair and right for Roger Hickle contractors and subcontractors and the public and the municipality. And while I realize the last couple items may appear very confrontational, I think that the structure now that has been laid out really does give us space to have the kinds of conversations that we talked about during that discussion. So I do want to just reiterate that to the mayor and members of your team, Mr. Mayor, to let's set a meeting time, whether it's a work session or special meeting, and let's figure out a way forward that's in everyone's best interest. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet.
No comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo some of my comments, some of the comments of my colleagues. Thanks everyone for the hard work over the last couple days. I will say, I also appreciate that perhaps some of my colleagues will continue to advocate for a particular shelter location or proposal. And that is absolutely the right of all of my colleagues to do so. I appreciate that my colleagues approved of the clean slate strategy with some amendments that I didn't like, but that's okay. And part of that clean slate strategy, which we'll be discussing in further detail on March 31st, is really making sure that we're not starting from a predetermined outcome and really starting from a different point of reference. And I look forward to engaging that with my colleagues and with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dern.
Thank you. I have no comment.
Thank you, Mr. Salt.
Thank you. Within the coming months, hopefully we'll see the end of the cold weather shelter, and I look forward to working with both the Assembly and the administration, because we're on the clock, as Felix said the other night. I think it was November 23rd was his deadline, but we need to get moving forward in order to have something ready a planned, well thought out system to take care of our homeless when we hit cold weather again. Thank you.
Thank you. So for my part, I'm grateful for all of the hard work. I'm reminded that there is no place that's right for any of these services, because if the benchmark is not so many neighbors around and it's going to only have institutional impacts, that's not Tudor and Elmore. There are plenty of people who actually live right there. It's actually at that little crook in the road at the bottom of Highland Mountain where they proposed to put in the vet village, and all hell broke loose. Up and down and side to side of that intersection of all that land that's owned by the Mental Health Trust Authority, right next to the landfill. It actually stinks there. And didn't happen because the same thing happens everywhere. I think Janelle's comments are right. Everybody's a NIMBY in these discussions. And that's where the hard decisions have to be made. And I don't think it's fair to deposit all of the problems on one neighborhood, which we've done for so long, or even pick up the problem we have here and move it there. We just have to come up with a better promise to the community and deliver. And so I still continue to hold hope and recognize that we have, in the last couple of years, using ARPA and CARES and other funds, created hundreds of housing units, which is in the end the answer. And we need hundreds more. And for every dime we spend on shelter, I pray we spend 10 on housing. And with that, I am grateful to my peers on this body, and I would say we're adjourned.